very much. 안녕하십니까. 저는 최한준입니다. My Korean is not so good, so I'm going to talk in English today, so I apologize. I'm sorry about that. I have a handout. I hope everyone has received a handout. Instead of a PowerPoint, I think we should just follow along in the handout today. Before I start today on my topic, I wanted to give a little background on why the law and legal education is very important in the United States. You may be well aware of this, so this may be information that you already know, but in the United States, one of the most important things for doing business is actually the legal side of business. The United States is a heavily regulated country. We have many laws, not only criminal laws, but civil laws that govern how you run your business, from labor and employment issues, to licensing and permits, to liability issues. One of the main things that companies face is how to deal with the regulatory environment, and it's a big expense for them. For example, 10 years ago, General Motors used to make the Ford Explorer. They would sell the car for maybe $20,000, $25,000. The actual cost to make the car was about $13,000, $14,000. That's the hard manufacturing cost. Of that $13,000 or $14,000, $3,500 was just for OSHA, which is the Occupation Safety and Health Administration requirements on dealing with your facilities for your employees. So think about that. That's a very expensive component. So that's why law is important. And that's why many people go into law. So one of the things I'm going to talk about today, or the main thing I'm going to talk about today is, as a practicing lawyer, is law school worth it? Is it still worth it? What is the value? Many people have a very economic view of the law. And one of the things that I think is important is to look at the cost, the opportunities, compared to the return, what you're going to get back for law school. So that's going to be my topic. And so if you want to flip through, the first thing is a little background about myself, because you want to know, well, why is this person talking to me? Why is he telling me about law? Does he have any experience? Does he have any basis? So I am a 1993 graduate of Emory Law School. I worked at several large law firms. Some of them are King & Spalding, Troutman Sanders, Nelson Mullins, and my current firm, Ballard Spahr. Ballard Spahr is a large law firm based in Philadelphia. We have over 500 lawyers, 13 different offices, and I'm the office managing partner of the Atlanta office. We have about 43 lawyers in the office and about 80 staff people. So it's not the biggest office, but it's a nice sized office. My area of practice is public finance. I do financings for governments and for private companies. I also work with nonprofits and corporations in that area. So I'm more of a transaction lawyer. Many people think of lawyers, they think of lawyers that go to trial. A trial attorney is a lawyer that goes to court and someone who litigates. So the law, in terms of legal practice, splits into two ways. There's the transactions, and then there's the litigation. Transactions are people who help corporations, individuals, enter into contracts and business arrangements. The litigation side is when you have problems. When those contracts fail, or when you want to sue somebody, that's what the litigation folks do to help resolve disputes. So in terms of today's topic, I talked about value. Value today that I'm going to look at is purely economic. Value can be very subjective. If I am a 22-year-old student who's working at Starbucks, maybe I go to law school. I don't care if it's very expensive or not, because that's an opportunity for me. If you are a 35-year-old person with a family, with a mortgage, and law school maybe $100,000 or more, you may not want to do that. That might not be the best value for you. So it depends on the individual. But today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about law schools, the cost of law schools, the job opportunities, and the prospects for the future if you're interested in law school. Because as I said earlier, the law is an important part of our business environment, and whether we like it or not, it is part of doing business and it's a cost. So lawyers add a lot of value to companies. You want to avoid mistakes, you want to obey the law, and you want to enter into contracts that help you manage your risks. So if you will turn to page 5 on the handout, one of the first questions I always ask is, why are you interested in law school? Many people want to go to law school because they want to make money. It's a great career. Some people want to go to law school because they want to make a difference. They want to change the world. They want to work in public interest or government. Other people want to do it because their parents made them do it. It's a reputation. It's a good job to have. And so they want to do it for societal reasons. There's other reasons, and there's also maybe a combination of reasons. One of the things I do want to tell you is that law schools are primarily focused in on law firm practice. They encourage people to go to law firms and into private practice because the majority of graduates and alumni of law schools are lawyers who in private practice. They're the people who give money to law school. So that's why the law schools focus on them and not so much on public interest or government, because those people are not the big alumni. So one thing to keep in mind is that law schools have a general focus on private practice. If you turn to the next page, I'm going to talk about the current state of law schools and the legal market. On page 7, let's first start. Okay, you are interested in going to law school. Where should I go? That is probably one of the biggest questions you will ask. And first of all, on page 7, in Georgia, we have 5 accredited law schools. Accreditation is a certification that your law school meets minimum standards so that the students who get a law degree are qualified to maybe pass the bar and enter into the practice and get a license. The 5 here are Emory, Georgia State, John Marshall, Mercer, and University of Georgia. If you notice that Emory has the smallest class, and John Marshall has the largest class. We'll talk a little bit about enrollment size. If you turn to the next page, the next 2 pages, I wanted to give you a list of the top 50 law schools in the United States based on U.S. News and World Report. As you can see, the top law school is Yale, number 2 is Harvard, number 3 is Stanford. The top Georgia law school is Emory at number 23. The top 17 schools, 1 through 17, have never changed. They are always the same. They move around. Sometimes they go to number 15, number 14, number 12, number 1, number 2, but the top 17 have always been the same since U.S. News World Report publishes their list. About 20 years, roughly. These top 17 schools are the elite schools in the United States for law school. If you can get into one of these top 17 schools, I think there is a tremendous value in going to one of those. And then you kind of see the second tier, and then the third tier as you go down from number 18 to 30, and then 30 to 50. You can also see that many of these law schools, I showed you what the annual tuition, as well as how many people are enrolled. You have to divide the enrollment number. For example, Harvard University has 1,727 law students. They admit around 540 students in each class. That's how many spots are open in each year. If you turn to page 10, you will see now that unlike 2008, the applications to law schools have fallen as the cost has gone up. In 2008, in the United States, we had a terrible recession. And the private law market, in terms of jobs, in 2008, after 2008, we went back to the same employment level as 2001. About 9 years, eight years worth of job growth disappeared. Okay? The job market became very tight and competitive. Therefore, a lot of people who wanted to go to law school decided not to go to law school because the opportunities were not there. Also, if you will notice, it continues to decrease. From 2008 to 2009, 10, 11, and 13, the applications have come down such that we have a flat line. If you look on page 11, you will see that the number of applications has leveled off as the job market, even though the job market has improved, it's leveled off, and the number of law schools has increased. So you have less people going to law school. One of the things I do want to talk about is law school admissions. I served on the Emory Law School board, and we used to get all the statistics about applications and what kind of students we get, and the U.S. News will report ranking. The ranking is only important to two classes of people: students and parents. Lawyers, employers, professors, that ranking is not that important, okay? But for students and for parents, it's very important. They want their child, and the students want to go to the highest ranked law school they can get in. So the U.S. World News Report becomes a game. This is a little bit of a secret of inside information. So they look at components. They look at LSAT score, GPA, facilities, professors, the library, alumni donations, and they have each category. The two biggest categories are LSAT score and GPA of your incoming class. And the U.S. News World Report only looks at one person in that incoming class. It looks at the middle person, it looks at the mean, not the average, but the absolute middle person. And that's how they determine what the LSAT score average is, okay? The middle person. What happens is that if a law school's ranking goes down, the applications also go down. If a ranking goes up, the applications go up. Law schools are a business. They want more applications to get a better quality of students. So what do? What they do is they can buy students. Let me give you an example. When I went to law school at Emory, the average tuition was $15,000. And I did not receive a single scholarship, not 1 cent. Today at Emory, the average tuition, or the full tuition, is $46,000. But the students generally only pay about 70%. Very few people pay the full price. Everyone gets some sort of scholarship, because what has happened is law schools became very competitive. So I'm a student. I applied to Emory, I applied to Georgetown, and I applied to, let's say, Fordham University in New York. I get into all three places. I have a high LSAT score. Let's say I have, what is this scale? I have 160, let's say I have 168, and I have a 3.8 GPA. So all three schools want me because that helps them raise their U.S. News World Report ranking. So I get into all three, and Georgetown says, we have many students like you, no scholarship. Emory says, we have students like you, but not that many. We want you. We'll give you 25% scholarship. So Fordham says, oh, we want that guy. He's going to help our ranking. We'll give you 100% scholarship. Okay, so I have a decision. What do I pick? Do I go to Georgetown in the top 17 schools, but I pay full tuition? Do I go to Emory? Still a good school. I get some discount, but not 100%. Or I go to Fordham, which is maybe not even in the top 50, but I get a full scholarship. That's a tough choice, right? Part of the value, and so that's what all schools do. They give you scholarships to buy students, to buy quality students to improve their ranking. Indiana University, about 6-7 years ago, was not even in the top 50. They're now in the top 50. What happened was they had a big alumni give the school $30 million. They used that $30 million to provide scholarships to improve their ranking. So that's what I mean by law schools can buy you. Now, I don't know what everyone's particular situation is. If you decide to go to law school and apply, you may have options, or you may have very little options. So, but that's part of the game that you see in the law school. So, as part of why you want to go to law school, you have to think a little bit about the ranking and the job opportunities, the quality of the education, location, many things. It's not just tuition, not just the cost versus the return, because even if you go to Vanderbilt University, which is in the top 17, it's in Nashville, Tennessee, not everyone who graduates from Vanderbilt is employed. Their employment statistics are probably around 90%, okay? So 10% of the class did not have jobs after 9 months of graduation from their law school. That's how they measure the job statistics. They look at students 9 months after they graduate. Now, some students say, I don't want to practice law. I want to go somewhere else. And that's why maybe the statistic is not 100%. But just because you go to a top school does not always guarantee the best job. And also, depending on which school you go to, it may not lead to the type of job you want. For example, Yale Law School, they don't necessarily put a lot of students in big law firms who make big salaries. That's the University of Pennsylvania. 60% of all graduates from the University of Pennsylvania go to big law, meaning large law firms, where they make large starting salaries above $140,000, $160,000, $180,000. Not Yale University, not Harvard University, University of Pennsylvania. So it's not always, you have to be a smart student, you have to be a smart shopper, and figure out which law school is the best for you. Some people, I know, I have a classmate. He's from Georgia, grew up in Atlanta. His family's from Atlanta. He wants to stay in Atlanta. So he didn't want to go to Harvard or Yale or UCLA. He wanted to go to a school in Georgia. So he went to Georgia State. Okay? Georgia State, you say, oh, that's not even in the top 50. But for him, what was most important was being able to go to a law school that was affordable, because Georgia State was so much cheaper than Emory or Mercer, and one that gave him opportunities to practice law in Atlanta. So for him, location or region was very important. So you have to look at all of those things, and you cannot be driven solely by ranking. But I know a lot of people like ranking, because I also like rankings too. I also want to say that if you have any questions, ask me anytime. We can talk about your question, and I'll try to give you an answer right away. Back to the handout here. If you look on page 12, you can see that these law schools are very expensive, and many people borrow money. Not that many people have, for Emory, $46,000. So $46,000 in tuition, plus room and board, books, living expenses. You may spend $65,000 a year. Over 3 years, that's what, 100, maybe 200, almost 190 some $1,000. That's a lot of money. If you have that money, maybe you shouldn't go to law school. Maybe you're doing something else. But many people don't have that money, so they borrow. So if you look, you will see for 2011, which is the latest statistics we have, for public schools, the average debt for the graduate is $75,000. For the private law schools, you're looking at almost $125,000. And in the United States, under the U.S. bankruptcy laws, student loans are not forgivable. The only way you don't have to pay back your student loans is if you die or you're permanently disabled where you can't work. Let me tell you a secret, it's very hard for the lawyer to say I'm permanently disabled. Because you can still practice law even if you can't walk, even if you're blind, even if you don't have any hands, you can still practice law. So it's very hard to claim permanent disability as a lawyer. So that's a big expense, right? So people ask, well, why should I go to law school? That's so expensive. And all of this 3 years of my life, and this is, it's hard, it's very competitive. Well, the reason people go to law school, I think, is some of the things we talked about. Make a difference and make money and other things. The average salary for all practicing lawyers is $135,000. The starting salary for all graduates as of this recent year in 2012 is $61,500. So you can make a good living as a lawyer, as long as you can get a job, right? So if you get quality employment, you can pay back your loans, and it's worth the investment. There was a study, I think it was maybe Fortune or Forbes magazine. They looked at doctors, lawyers, and MBAs. To get an MBA is 2 years. To get a medical degree is 4 years. To get a law degree is 3 years. They looked at the cost of the education, the opportunity cost, the starting salaries, and the tax brackets you go into. And they determined, what do you think? Let's take a guess. How many people think the MBA was the best choice? Okay. How many people think medicine was the best choice, being a doctor? And how many think law was the better choice? Law was the better choice. Medicine, the medical school was too long, 4 years, very expensive, and the average starting salary for doctors are very low. You're an intern, you're a resident. For the first 5 years, you don't really make a lot of money. It's not the best value. The MBA degree was 2 years, so it was much cheaper, but the starting salaries for MBAs, especially junior trainees, were very low compared to the average salary for lawyers. Now, I will tell you that this statistic is misleading to a degree because not everyone will go into a big law firm, like my law firm, Ballard Spahr, where the average starting salary is $145,000. So if you graduate from law school, start as a first-year lawyer, you will make $145,000, maybe more if you get a bonus. But we don't have that many spots. In my particular office, we may only hire 1, maybe 2 people a year for those positions. Highly competitive. If you're at Emory Law School and there's 230 people in your class, maybe 25% of the class is going to go to a big law firm with that kind of salary. What about the rest of the people? Some of those people are going to go to public interest. Some may open up their own law firm, be a solo practitioner. Some people may not even practice law. So the salary is misleading. I think that the Forbes or Fortune article only looked at the best case, not the average case. So that sort of takes me to sort of one of the next slides, if you look on page 13, is you have a proliferation now of what I would call for-profit schools. These law schools usually are non-accredited by the American Bar Association. And these law schools charge private school tuition, $40,000, and sometimes 80% of the graduates can't even pass the bar exam. So they have all this debt and no job opportunities. Even if they could get hired by a big law firm, they can't, because sometimes they can't even pass the bar. Be very careful about for-profit law schools. If you look on page 14, there's been several cases where people have sued law schools about their job statistics as being false and misleading advertisement. The American Bar Association is trying to change that, where the accreditation for law schools, instead of 75% have to pass the bar, they're trying to raise it to 80% to try to help stop some of the proliferation of private law schools. And do you know where the most of the private law schools are? They're in California. In California, you don't have to have a law degree to take the bar exam. California is the only state in the United States that does not require you to graduate from an accredited law school to sit and take the bar exam. They have a very, very tough bar exam. Sometimes less than half pass, because not everyone has to go to law school. Georgia, for example, has a very high pass rate. 75%, 80% of the people who take the bar pass the bar. Also, if you fail the bar the first time, the chances of you passing the bar exam the second time is very low. I'm not sure of the statistics, but more than half of the people who take the bar exam twice fail again. I remember one guy in my bar exam, he was there for the 6th time. That was the 6th time. I don't think he passed. Maybe he did 7, maybe he did 8, maybe he gave up, I don't know. But if you can't pass the bar, it's going to be hard for you to practice law because you won't have a license. So be very careful about the for-profit law schools, as well as the quality of the education. So let's turn to page 16. And let's say you've gone through 3 years of law school. You've done well, or you haven't done well. You graduated, now what do you do? What are the job, employment opportunities? If you look on page 16, you will notice that of the recent law graduate employment data from the American Bar Association, okay, you have roughly 46,000 people graduating. That's a lot of lawyers, okay? That's up slightly. It's up slightly. Of that, 45,000 had some kind of job. We don't know if it's a law job, or if they're pouring coffee at Starbucks, or if they're doing something else, but they had some kind of job. And some of them were not even in full-time jobs. They're in part-time jobs. If you look at that, 26,000 were in full-time jobs. And then there was a small percentage who are still seeking employment, who are not employed. So it's a tough market, as I told you before. Law firm jobs are very typical now. When I was a summer associate at King & Spalding, we had about almost 50 people in my summer class. And of that 50, I would say 45 of us got offers to start as first-year associates. Very high percentage. Now, King & Spalding, this year's class is less than 10, it's 9. And they're a huge law firm. They have over 1,000 lawyers. So think about that. It's a very competitive market out there for big law firm jobs. But don't dismay. There are other law-related jobs. You can be in smaller law firms. You can be in government, public interest, in a lot of different areas. And some people don't even practice law. They don't have an intention to practice law. They want to go into politics. They want into government. They use it for journalism. There's a lot of people who use their law degrees because there's some benefits, and I'll get to the benefits of law school, because I'm giving you all the bad stuff, right? All the negative, like, law school is really expensive. Jobs are real scarce. Why should I go to law school? And we'll talk about maybe more, I'll talk more about why there are some positives. But I wanted to give you some realistic information because I think you need to be well educated if you're seriously considering law school. So if you look at page 17, you can kind of see where the jobs are by sector. Solo practitioners, law firms. The way they define law firm here is law firms of 2 or more people. So it doesn't distinguish between small law firms and big law firms. I wish they did, but they don't. Business, government, public interest, clerkships, that's with judges, and education. There are some areas that are doing really well. I've got another statistic, it's not on the slide, but let's see here. The 5 best cities right now for jobs, for law, are Denver, Houston, Dallas, Miami, and Pittsburgh. A lot of fracking, oil shale work in Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania. So that's why there's a lot of law firm jobs. The 5 worst cities, Kansas City, Chicago, Los Angeles, Seattle, and Indianapolis. They had the largest decreases in law jobs compared to the others that had the largest increases. The 6th worst city is New York. But you know what? New York has the most lawyers. They have the most jobs. So I think that's misleading. So the percentage of law firm jobs or law jobs have decreased in New York, but there's so many opportunities in New York that if I had a chance, I would go to New York. Some of the other sort of areas that are, well, let's look at page 18, and you can see the regions. You can see that New England, the Mid-East, Great Lakes, Plains, Southeast, Rocky Mountain, and Far West are the regions, and the number of average job openings. And this is pure law, legal jobs. How many are from ABA accredited law schools, and how many people didn't get jobs, the surplus, okay? And if you look at the Southeast, let's look at the Kazar region, the grad per opening is 1.92, so there are about 2 people competing for that one job. If you look at the New England, Boston, it's 3-1. Highly competitive arena. Some of the areas that are really, really hot right now, that from a law firm, from an employer's, because that's what I am sometimes as I'm the employer perspective, is intellectual property litigation. If you have a science technical background, you have an advantage. Also, there's an advantage for people speaking Chinese. There are a lot of law firms who are doing business with Chinese companies, and Mandarin is important. Korean companies are doing well too. You know, Kia and Hyundai are in the Southeast, they're in Alabama and Georgia. And I think there are similar opportunities for Koreans, but Korean business for law firms is not the same as the opportunities with Chinese companies, because China is such a bigger country and there are more opportunities. But I think there may be opportunities for that. So language can be a way to distinguish yourself. And I think it's more than just language. It's cultural understanding. I'm the employer. If I just need someone to speak Chinese or Korean, I'm going to hire a translator. I want someone who understands the culture, who understands how to do business, as well as speak the language. That's more important for me as an employer, and that's what I would look at in terms of language and cultural skills. Another area that a lot of folks are finding interesting, as well as being very sort of a hot area, is labor and employment. Everyone really, really cares about jobs, their job especially. And so employers and employees have a lot of disputes. And so labor and employment law currently is a rising area within the law in terms of private practice. Other areas that are somewhat important or getting to be a lot more activity is environmental law. Areas that are not so good right now are bankruptcy, and to some degree, commercial litigation. Businesses are not suing each other as much. They're resolving their disputes in other ways, because lawyers are very expensive. When my clients face litigation, when they have to sue or be sued, I tell them 3 things, and they're all bad. I tell them, it's going to take a long time, longer than you want. And it's very expensive. Lawyers are very expensive. And it's very stressful. So litigation, a lot of people want to avoid it. They want to resolve their disputes without having to go to court. Because sometimes when you go to court, you may lose. You think I'm going to win, I have the best case. I was wronged. These people are evil. That's not always the way the jury sees it. The jury says, well, no, Mr. Choi, you're wrong. You're evil. You lose. So juries can be very unpredictable. So that's why I think a lot of companies are trying to avoid litigation, resolve it, do disputes in other ways, and that's why commercial litigation has come down. So those are some of the areas. So I will tell you, the one thing about IP litigation is everyone thinks, that sounds like an interesting arena. That sounds like a great opportunity, but IP litigation takes a long time. In my law firm, for the IP practitioners, especially patent lawyers, we only hire PhDs. That's how competitive it is. Sometimes we take someone with a master's degree because they have a specialty that we need, like biotech or something like that. But if you're a chemical engineer, electrical engineer, mechanical engineer, those kind of folks, even if you have a physics degree, we're going to want you to have that level of expertise because that's what the market is currently. And so not only do you have to get your PhD, but you got to go to 3 years of law school on top of that. That's a long time. So IP sounds like a great area, but I think you need to be a little realistic. IP litigation is a little bit different because in IP litigation, you don't have to have the science background because it's really litigation, it's resolving disputes. So if you have some science background, and then you can also be someone who can go to court and argue and likes that kind of practice, I think there's a lot of opportunities in IP litigation. As we have read in the paper, IP litigation is on the front page. Samsung and Apple suing each other all over the world. Also, intellectual property is where a lot of the assets are currently being valued. Many companies, their primary asset is intellectual property. It's not the product or the widget. Everyone says, oh, Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola, they make brown sugar water. What they really have is a brand, Coca-Cola. You know, the script, the bottle, the color, the name, that's their primary asset. And they protect that and using intellectual lawyers. Whenever they see anything like Coke or Cola or Coca-Cola, they go after them. They really do, very, very aggressive. That's an easy example. A more difficult example, but something that's intuitive, is car companies. You would think that the car company's biggest asset is the product, the car. No, it's becoming the intellectual property. Cars today are very sophisticated and advanced. The technology today in cars is not the brake and the wheel and the steering. It's the infotainment. It's the nav system. It's the lane change, so if you get sleepy and you start to drift, it gives you a warning. It's the brake assist system. It's the rear camera that helps you back up. All of these are electronic systems driven by intellectual property technology, especially electrical engineering type of activities, because these are all driven by computers and sensors. That's how the car companies are distinguishing themselves. So if you're Ford Motor Company, and you have the control, you have the intellectual property to control the rear-facing camera system. So anybody else who wants to have a car with a feature that has the monitor, and then when you back up, you just look at the monitor, they can't do that without your permission. So Ford, think about that. That's a big competitive advantage for Ford. I'm not saying Ford has that. I'm just making an example. This is a hypothetical. But those types of things are where the intellectual property is creating assets and value, and where lawyers are very, very integral in not only creating that asset, but protecting and maintaining that asset. Patents are only good for 20 years. They're not forever, only 20 years. That's why when the drug companies, when a drug goes generic, you know how the price drops dramatically? You used to pay $200 for a prescription, all of a sudden it's $10 because the 20 years has lapsed and it goes generic. And when it goes generic, then anybody can make it because they make the compound the same formula. Merck no longer has the patent rights to that formula. So because it's only 20 years, and especially drug companies, because they invest billions of dollars, they really, really protect it. And that's why Samsung and Apple go after each other, because the ability to scroll on your phone like this is a key feature. If your phone doesn't do that, you're probably not going to buy it, right? Well, that's what they're fighting about, basically, is the ability to do that. Who invented that? Who owns that? Is what they're fighting about. In essence, I'm making it very simple, but that's the kind of litigation that's going on. So those are some of the areas I wanted to talk to you about. I want to go back a little bit to the slide, because on page 19, I talked about the starting salaries, and you can see them, there's the overall, and then there's the law firm median, and I told you that the average practicing lawyer makes about $130,000. Lawyers do well, especially if you're in private practice. If you go to page 20 and 21, I sort of highlighted some things about employment figures. The job market is coming back. My firm especially, we're starting to hire more lawyers. But I do not think that law firms, big law firms, will go back to the level of employment that we had 10 years ago. The law practice is changing, and it's changing rapidly. There are a lot of legal services that people buy that aren't from law firms, and it's getting, I think, balkanized. Let me give you an example. I am a company. Let me think of something. Okay, I make Marlboro cigarettes. I'm Philip Morris. You know, cigarettes. I've been sued, class action. 1 million people sued me saying that smoking causes cancer. So I had to hire lawyers, go defend in Florida, Montana, Alaska, everywhere, right? What do I do? How do I tackle this problem? And legal services, that's a big, complex legal problem. In my old law firm, we represented a drug company. And in the drug company's annual budget, company-wide, their second most expensive item was our law firm's legal cost. Think about it. This is a multi-billion-dollar company, international company. The second biggest expense for them was the cost of litigation. Over $35 million a year. That's a big number. So how do I manage this? So companies are trying to reduce their legal costs. So what do I do? Maybe the discovery part. So when you sue, the other side says, give me all the information. I want to know about your memorandum, your scientific research, your whatever. So they make a document discovery request. Send me all this information. So someone's got to gather them, right? Someone's got to organize it. Someone's got to figure out what can be given, what stays back, because some of it may be confidential, attorney-client privilege. And it used to be about 10 years ago, junior lawyers did that. That's what you did as a junior lawyer. You had boxes, you get a big box, you go through, privilege, not privilege, privilege, not privilege. And that's what's given to opposing counsel. That's very expensive, especially if I'm charging $300 an hour, right? Wow, I'm worth $300 an hour? Man, it takes me 2 hours to mow my grass. That's a lot of money I'm losing. No. So, what do companies do? They hire folks, outsource it. So I may hire a discovery firm or a discovery practice who will do that. A discovery firm may say, we will just do this. We will just do the discovery portion. And we're going to use cheaper labor. We're going to put our facilities in West Virginia and use those employees in West Virginia and pay lower wages so that instead of you paying $300 an hour, you only pay $150 an hour. Wow, that's a 50% reduction. I will sign up for that deal because I'm the company. Or maybe I say, well, guess what? We could do it for $50 an hour and we're going to do it in India. And that's what companies do. So the jobs that used to be at big law firms, there's less of them because the work that we used to do has changed. Has changed the way we do it. Because companies are cost sensitive. They don't want to pay $35 million a year. Who does, right? And you may still lose. So it's one of those things where they try to manage their costs, and that's why the level of employment is probably not going to go back to the level they were before, but there's still a rising job market. Just one more thing, and then we talk about the good parts. On page 22, and I'm running out of time, I just want to give you a quick list of some people who graduated from law school who don't practice law. Obviously, the president and first lady, they're law school graduates, Harvard Law School, right? They don't practice law. Bill and Hillary Clinton don't practice law. And you can see a whole list of people. Man, did you know that Fidel Castro was a lawyer? I didn't know that. Julio Iglesias, he's a lawyer? Wow. So those are some really interesting things because I wanted to show you that just because you go to law school and get a law degree doesn't mean you end up practicing law. And you can do a lot of things, and so let me talk about some of the good stuff of why I think you should go to law school if you're interested. And there's an economic component. So the number of applications is going down. The job market is increasing. The tuition cost, I didn't tell you this, but the tuition cost for law schools has flatlined and is going down a little bit. And you don't pay full rate anymore. Sometimes you may get a free ride. So the cost and the opportunities are increasing. The current management and leaders in law firms, especially private practice, are getting older. They're what we call the baby boomers. In about 10, 15 years, they'll be all gone. Seriously, they'll be all gone. And we're going to have new talent come up and replace jobs that the folks in the middle, like me, are rising up to. Then the people underneath us, who are going to become the middle, who's going to be the next class to come up and become lawyers who then become law firm leaders and practitioners. So with applications going down, with job market going up, with the boomers decreasing, I think there's going to be some opportunities for you if you go to law school. Also, I think in terms of the value, you got to go to a good law school. Because if you go to a for-profit school or a school maybe not in the top 50, even if you finish in the top 10% of your class, your job opportunities are going to be less. So you got to have that opportunity cost and look at that. So if you can get into a high-quality law school, then I think it's worth it. The other thing I want to tell you is that going to law school is a really good training ground. If you notice on this page, on page 22, at the very top it says 9% of all Fortune 50 CEOs are lawyers. The top 50 companies in the world, well not the world, top 50 companies in the United States, Fortune 50. This is IBM, General Electric, Citigroup. 9% are lawyers. They're the chief executive officer. They're not practicing law, but they're running the company. So a law degree is a great place to train your mind. It makes you think critically. It makes you organize your mind. It makes you be able to effectively communicate. Those are valuable skills. It's hard to put a price on that, but those skills help you in business, not only in law, but in other areas. That's why you see a lot of lawyers who are in entertainment. You see a lot of lawyers in journalism and in government, especially politics, because they get really solid legal training. And that's a skill that's hard to value, but I think it's quite valuable and you can use it regardless of whether you practice law or not. So I think you've heard sort of some of my thoughts on why you should go to law school, and that it's worth it now. Now, I said before that it's individual and personal. Everyone in this room, if you want to go to law school, has to make a rational decision. The cost, the opportunity lost or the opportunity cost, what law school I get, the region, the job opportunities, do I really want to practice law, do I want something else? Those are personal decisions, but I think overall, law school is still valuable, still worth it, and unfortunately in our United States sort of society, the law is really where a lot of disputes and a lot of regulation occur, and whether we like it or not, it's not going to go away anytime soon. Thank you very much.